Good afternoon and welcome to the Franczek Property Tax Update webinar. My name is Ares Dalianis. With me are my partners Michael Hernandez and Scott Metcalf. The three of us make up the revenue protection team at the firm, working with school districts throughout the state on essential property tax questions relating to what is likely your largest funding source. We're delighted to have you with us for the next 30 minutes or so to discuss new legislation and other important developments in the property tax field. Several of you have provided us with questions during the registration process that we plan to address, and you can also send us additional questions through the webinar in the Q&A box on your screen. This afternoon, we'll be discussing a number of important topics, and let me get to the preview. So we're going to talk about two recent legislative changes that have generated a lot of interest. A big question for many of you: when will that second installment of Cook County property taxes be due? An update on what's happening at the PTAB, in the circuit court, and local boards of review. Assessment trends generally in the Northeastern Illinois region, and then leave some time to answer your questions. So let's start with the first legislative piece. We've got the PTEL amendment that I'm going to talk about a little bit, and then this new cash balance disclosure that Scott's going to address. So first of all, earlier this year, it was late May when the governor signed the legislation, a new provision came out that seemed good. I know when I first read it, it seemed like, hey, this is going to provide some opportunity. It's available applicable for first use with your 2022 levy year. It applies to certain school districts, those that have achieved the ISB recognition or review status, also park districts, libraries, community college districts. And basically what it allows a district to do is to carry forward into the future levy authority that it didn't use in, say, this year or a future year because it didn't levy to the max. So the difference between your maximum permitted levy and your actual levy, that delta can be carried forward for each succeeding levy year until it's fully utilized. Now, to be eligible for this carry forward, to take this levy difference and utilize it, a district must certify to the county clerk that it did not extend to the maximum permitted by law, and that certification has to be filed with the county clerk within 60 days of submitting and filing your levy with the clerk. So what the certification looks like, we're not really sure yet. We have not drafted one for anybody. We haven't seen any templates from a county clerk. There's nothing in the statute that says you need to identify the amount of the quote unquote under levy, just that you did not levy to the max. We would suggest that at least the first time you submit the certification, you probably want to confirm it with your county clerk, make sure that he or she is comfortable with the form. And just to give you an example of what 60 days might look like. So if you're brave and you file your levy on the last possible Tuesday in December, which this year would be December 27th, you would then have until February 26th in order to get that certification on file. Now, the big caveat and why I was sort of hesitating early on is that the under levy amount that you want to use in succeeding years following the year that you levy something less than the maximum permitted by law, that is still limited to a 5% increase. So there's less here than meets the eye. It certainly seems great, but I think, I know that we were not consulted in the drafting of this new section. I'm not sure who was, but it sort of gives with one hand and takes with the other. So it really is kind of a major limitation under this new section. It's 18-190.7. So if you are a district that consistently is levying below the max, I think this can give you some value and give you another tool in your toolbox. If you are a district that is consistently levying at the max and maybe 1 year decides to go below, you might not have an opportunity in the future to actually use this additional authority. And then the other thing that is really not addressed by this new statute, but which is a factor to think about, is whether your county clerk is applying a loss factor, because that's going to bump you up a little bit more and maybe take away a bit of that authority in future years. So this is new, not been implemented yet. What we're seeing is that I think even some of the county tax extenders are still trying to figure this one out. So this is sort of a work in progress.
Ares, let me remind our participants that if there are any questions as we're going forward, feel free to drop them into the Q&A section or the chat section of the screenshot here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and Ares, there's another new change as well to PTEL, which is that new recapture levy is completely outside of the PTEL limitations. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, so good point, Scott. So that's the new section 18-233, effective, was approved and signed by the governor August of 21. You probably got something from your county treasurer in early to mid-November showing you the amount of the recapture. So essentially another tool in the toolbox to address what and how you want to use it. It's up to you. It allows you to recapture for the prior 12-month period from C of E refunds, valuation objection, and PTAB refunds. County clerks, some treasurers are posting it on their websites, others are sending out correspondence. But again, as Scott said, it's one more change to PTEL, one more tool in your toolbox, one more way that you can communicate with the community and your board regarding your levy.
So the cash balance disclosure requirement was part of the same legislation that amended PTEL. This bill added a new section to the school code 17-1.3. And honestly, in reading this for a couple of clients, it looks like this particular statute could have been the result of some legislative compromise, because the way it is worded does not necessarily match with how school districts actually operate from a financial point of view. There are a couple of things to unpack about the statutory language, so that's the first place that we need to start. The statute says that the cash reserve balance of all funds held by the district related to its operational levy must be disclosed to the public or at the hearing at which the district certifies its budget and levy. So there are three things to unpack here. First of all is disclosure to the public. The statute is silent on what form that disclosure must take. It only says that the information must somehow be provided at the public hearing. And the dictionary definition of disclosure is that the information is made available to be seen. So it does not say that it has to be part of newspaper notice. It does not say that it has to be part of the PowerPoint presentation. It just says that the information must be disclosed. The second thing to unpack is the budget and levy hearings. First of all, a hearing is required on the budget, but that hearing must occur before the budget's actual adoption. That hearing is not going to occur necessarily at the same exact meeting where the budget is adopted. And then secondly, a hearing on the levy is only required under the truth and taxation law if the increase over the prior year is more than 5%. So there is a situation in which there would not even be a hearing on the levy. There would just be adoption of the levy at a board meeting. So it's quite possible that you should be reading public hearing to mean public meeting. And then the final thing to unpack is cash reserve balance. Cash reserve balance is a term of art, but it's not a term that's used in either the budget documents or the annual financial report documents that are provided by ISB. So it's likely that cash reserve balance is actually synonymous with unreserved fund balance, which is something that's already in your AFR and your budget documents. So it's a statute that if you have questions about, definitely consult your legal counsel, but the wording of it is definitely less than ideal. Now, the big issue that we wanted to get to for Cook County school districts is the timing of the second installment Cook County tax bills. Before we move on to there, we have a question I see that just came up. What does operational levy exactly mean? And my understanding of the term operational levy is that it is your educational fund, your O&M fund, and your transportation fund. Ares or Mike, am I missing anything there? I think those are going to be your operational funds. Your debt service, capital projects, and working cash would not necessarily be considered operating funds.
Yeah, I agree with you, Scott. I mean, to me, it's the funds in 17-2A that are allowed among transfers with operational funds. So yes.
So unless there are other questions on the cash balance disclosure statute, timing of second installment Cook County tax bills. It was the last time we had late tax bills in Cook County was 2010. And so for the last dozen years, tax bills have been due on August 1st. But this year there have been delays. And the cause of the delays, the answer to why have there been delays depends on who you ask. And aside from the finger pointing, what we know is that the county officials have made a pledge to get the tax bills paid and due before the first of the year. And based on everything that we're seeing right now, it looks like they will be able to accomplish that. The prediction right now is that tax bills in Cook County will be due in mid-December. And here's how that breaks down. The first installment was due back in March, but before the second installment can be paid, a number of steps have to occur. First, the Board of Review appeals all must be completed. And Mike is going to talk in a little bit about just how many appeals that they have to go through. But the Board of Review has not yet completed its work. Normally, that work is completed back in May. Currently, there are 10 townships at the Board of Review that are still being worked on, 10 out of 38. And based on where they are in the appeal process and the pattern of dealing with those appeals, it looks as though the Board of Review will close up its work by the first week of October. The next step after the Board of Review certifies all of the assessments is that the equalization factor has to be calculated by the Illinois Department of Revenue. That usually takes about 2 weeks. Then the tax rates have to be calculated by the county clerk's office, and the county clerk needs to confirm those extension sheets with each district. Figure another 2 weeks for that. And then the treasurer needs to print the bills and mail them out. Assume another 2 weeks for printing the tax bills. That brings us to about the second week in November, when we would anticipate that the tax bills would be mailed out. So that is our best information that we have at this point, but really what we need to do is keep a close eye on the news and the Cook County Treasurer's website to find out if there are any changes to that.
And Scott, this is double hearsay, but my understanding is Tanya Antofer, the Cook County Director of Tax Extension, spoke yesterday at the West Suburban School Business Managers Group. And she confirmed essentially what you're saying is that the rate report will be done by the end of October. That allows the treasurer to print the bills, get them in the mail, and have the situation where the bills would be due before Christmas. So that all adds up.
Okay, I think we're going to move on to PTAB. All right, so let me, there's been a couple of questions that have come in. Will you be able to download the presentation? Yes, we'll make sure that we make that available. Will it be available via video in the future? Yes, this is being videoed. So we want to make sure we get at least those questions answered. There's a couple other questions. Scott, is it possible that Cook County homeowners will have to pay 3 tax bills in calendar year 2023? If not, will this delay be a new yearly normal, or is it expected that everyone will pay in December of 2022?
Right now, it's expected that everyone will pay in December 2022. Theoretically, it is possible that people would have to pay 3 tax bills in 2023, but that would be every taxpayer, not just homeowners. And nobody wants that to happen. So the county officials are trying to move heaven and earth to make sure that people don't have 3 tax bills in 2023. And, hopefully this is not a new normal for us. This year, it was largely a result, in my opinion, of an upgrade in technology where one computer system was not talking to another computer system. And by 2023, that should be fixed.
Okay, let's talk a little about PTAB here. A lot of information. We're going to give you a lot of data, but what I want you to focus on to avoid information overload are the trends. Okay, so the next 4 slides, I'm going to start with some specific. We're going to start with Cook County at the PTAB, and then we're going to expand from there. PTAB go into some of the collar counties and then statewide. So what this slide represents is these are the PTAB cases, 2016 to 2020, that have already been decided. And what this one focuses on is the number of appeals with requests for a reduction equal to or greater than $100,000 in AV, an assessed value. Okay, so what numbers are we seeing here? We're seeing in 2016, 569 decisions regarding this category of property. There is, in addition to the graph we have here, we have kind of a line that's showing the level of assessed value that was at issue in these determinations. This involves all cases. So when I ask Ares to move to the next one, we'll start talking about all cases. But again, 569 cases. We're talking about real money here, $205,825,262 that affect Cook County. As you see, it's so we know that most of the 2016 cases have been decided, and likely most of the 2017. The 2018 and 19 they're starting to get to, and the 2020s have mostly been filed, and so some have been resolved. About 140 of those have been resolved, representing over almost 2.8 million of assessed value in total cases. So again, we're seeing kind of a slight reduction trend, but we're talking about real cases here, real money, that recapture levy becomes an important tool as you're moving forward. Why don't we move on to the next slide? Okay, so this is, again, what we just talked about was how many of those appeals involve requests. This is commercial and industrial requests for a change in value over equal to or over $100,000 in assessed value. So when we look at this, we're going to have the next slide. We're going to compare it to total cases. Why this is important for you and as you talk to your boards is there are quite a few cases you don't get notice of, right? There are substantial residential cases. And again, the commercial cases below this threshold, you don't get the notice for. So why don't we move on to the next slide?
You got it.
So, so I think we want to go, yeah, there you go. So this is the total number of appeals decided. So let me just do some comparison in numbers again. So that have been decided so far, again, we see most of 2016 decided. What was the total number of appeals versus the total number of appeals that you received notice of and likely intervened in? The total was 13,193 versus the 569. These are decided, again, by the PTAB, either in settlement or by as a result of hearing or a decision without a hearing. So again, total 13,193 versus the 596 that you have got notice of or are familiar with. Those numbers go down for 2017. 464 again have been decided. A total for the commercial industrial above 100,000. Total cases decided almost 10,000. So trying to disaggregate some of the money, getting a sense of the impact. We talked about the assessed value impact. The assessed value impact for the all of the PTAB cases that have been decided for Cook County for 2017, 142,812. So why don't we move on to the next one? Let's look at, so we left Cook County, okay? Let me kind of mention some of the counter counties before we go into what's happening with PTAB. What's the trend say to us here statewide? But let me give you some kind of verses. Hey, Mike, what about a counter county like DuPage County? What's happening with there? What kind of volume are we seeing there at the PTAB? Because the PTAB is important for the commercial and industrial. Those are the larger cases, right, that are being decided that have not been resolved at the Board of Review. And what I'm going to talk about later in the presentation is the Board of Review, what we have seen there. Here we have a PTAB retrospective of 20 years. But so, for example, DuPage County, where based on, I know, Ares and Scott's experience there, you have local assessors and the Board of Review that kind of work together to resolve matters, so there are not a lot of PTAB cases. So what's the volume of filing in 2016 was 95 decisions that were handed down for 2016 versus the 569 in Cook County. What's the AV value, total cases? Total cases was 148, and then the total AV was 10,972. Much different numbers. We understand Cook versus, because Cook has, you know, these large shopping centers. These are Woodfield Mall. You have Chicago in there. But what you see in DuPage, for example, is 10 million, 12.6 million, and 12.3 million. Much different numbers from a county where there's much work between cooperative work between the assessors and the Board of Review. So let's look at Lake County. What are the numbers at Lake County? Less appeals. So for example, 66 appeals, total 239 in 2016, 14 million in AV has been affected. 2017, 20 million in AV. 2019, 24 million in AV. So a little different there, a little different dynamics when you're working with the assessors and the Board of Review on trying to resolve those matters to avoid PTAB filings. So then what does this chart before us indicate? So indicates the PTAB came to Cook County in 1997. This shows in 2000 kind of a steady increase. You see certain spikes of increases. 2001, there's a spike, right? 9/11 happened in that year. 2008, there was a major impact on the property. You see a big spike there. And then you see a consistent spike or consistent increase in Cook County. The blue is the Cook County between 2014 to 2019. What's significant about 2019 in Cook County? New assessor, first year of doing his approach to assessments. You see a substantial drop in 2020. Assessor making some changes. The board is making some changes. Board of Review is becoming more active and helping on cases. But again, consistent increase in the property appeals for the entire state affecting your assessed value for your properties. Okay.
Okay. Other than PTAB, the other place where taxpayers can challenge their taxes and seek refunds from school districts is in circuit court. And there are two types of circuit court cases that are brought. One is tax rate objections, and the other is valuation objections. This slide deals with the rate objections that we are familiar with, and it gives you the county, the tax years that are open, and the dominant issue that we see in that county. Couple of things about how the process for this works. In Cook County, you'll notice that the years are quite a bit older than all the other counties. That's because rate objections in Cook County are not activated until the presiding judge of the county division issues an order opening them up. So it could be almost a decade before the tax rate objections in Cook County are even in front of a judge. In all other counties, these cases are opened up within a few months of filing. So there's a big difference in procedure there. Now, the other big difference in procedure is that outside of Cook County, the county treasurer will pay refunds as individual objections are settled. But in Cook County, the treasurer waits until all objections for a given tax year are settled or resolved and then issues refunds. So you could have a situation where one or two taxing agencies hold out and delay the refunds for everyone else. So those are two things to keep in mind when we're looking at this. In terms of Cook County, just in reviewing the objections that I have looked at, the most dominant objection that's filed against almost every school district is loss and cost of collection. And this is a claim that the county clerk had no legal authority to add that factor to your levy over and above what the board approved. The statutory language is a little bit unclear. So generally these objections are settled for nuisance money rather than trying to litigate that issue. In DuPage and Lake County, the thing that we are seeing most is excess accumulation against a lot of school districts. And this goes back to the CIPS versus Miller, Illinois Supreme Court decision that you're probably all familiar with, that says that whenever your fund balance gets to be 2 to 3 times your average annual expenditures, then your levy is not justified. For years, this Miller ratio is calculated using the unreserved fund balance. Objectors Counsel has recently switched and started using the cash line from the assets and liabilities page, which is wrong for a couple of reasons, most notably that it doesn't account for the liabilities that should be subtracted from that number. And so they have these claims of excess accumulation that we do not think are justified based on historical practice. And then in Kane and Will County, the one that I've been dealing with most of all is the tort fund. And this is just a good reminder that the appellate court decision in Re Freeport requires you to have a risk management plan in place if you're going to be paying salaries out of the tort immunity fund. So that is the rate objection update in a nutshell. The other one is, of course, the valuation objections. And valuation objections can be filed in any circuit court anywhere in Illinois, but they're predominantly filed in Cook County. In fact, in looking at the statistics that the data that I've been dealing with, for the most recent tax year that's been activated, which is 2019, there were 10,150 valuation objections filed in Cook County Circuit Court. So, there's a couple of things that happen differently in Cook County than anywhere else. One of which is that in Cook County, taxing agencies do not receive notice of these cases. In every other county in Illinois, taxing agencies receive notice of these circuit court cases just like they would in a PTAB appeal, and that allows them to get involved if they would like to. The second thing is that it was not until 2008 that there was any recognition that taxing agencies could even have standing to intervene in these cases. That was the result of an Illinois Supreme Court decision in Madison 2 Associates versus Pappas, which I know Ares and Mike worked on before I got here, filing an amicus brief in the Illinois Supreme Court, laying out the reasons why school districts should be able to intervene in these valuation objections. So, long story short, 2019 is the most recent tax year that's been opened up in Cook County, and the 2020 tax year cases will be activated in January of 2023. According to the data that I've been working with, for 2020 2013 and 2014, there was over $100 million in each of those years refunded as a result of these cases. There are still a lot of open cases for 2016 through 2018, so those refund numbers are going to grow and probably exceed $100 million per tax year as well. Now, on the screen right now is a screenshot of the database that we've developed for tracking this. Like I said, school districts don't receive notice, so we have to go out and try to figure out the best way to identify the cases to intervene in. What we do is we cross-reference the case information with the assessed value information, with the tax rates, and the refund history from the old cases to determine the refund exposure, in which cases it makes sense for our clients to intervene in. So this is a new product that we've just had to develop because it's simply not as easy to intervene in these cases as it is in some of the PTAP cases. So the next thing I think we want to discuss today is some of the assessment trends in Cook County.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. 2022 is a reassessment for the north and northwest suburbs. So we are listing here those townships in Cook County that have opened where the assessor has provided his assessment for the new cycle. So you looked at one of the slides that Mike showed where there was a big spike in 2019. That was the last reassessment of the north and northwest suburbs. This is the most recent reassessment. You can see from these townships that everybody's getting, you know, the residential class, it's pretty significant, 28%, 40%, commercial, again, pretty sizable increases, and then industrial, which has really seen the most growth in terms of value and the most enhancement. Frankly, COVID was a boon for the industrial market. Those are going up the most. And so there are still a few townships left to open: Northfield, Leiden, Wheeling, and Niles. So we don't have that data yet. And then if you look at it slightly differently, Cranes actually ran a story yesterday, had this table, that's the source. So they broke it down for these townships by residential and then all non-residential. So that'd be Class 5A commercial, 5B industrial, and Class 3 multifamily apartments. And what you're not seeing here, although in Barrington it spikes, you're not seeing any 100% increases. And in the 2019 reassessment, when Assessor Kagi took over, he really made a point of trying to correct some gross undervaluation situations, especially in the multifamily area. So a lot of that correcting has been done, but there's obviously still more work to be done. But the bumps that we're seeing with the 22 reassessment are not at the same level that you saw in 2019. And with that, I want to turn it back to Mike.
Thank you, Ares. So I want to talk a little about the Cook County Board of Review and what kind of volume we're seeing there, what their report, their most recent report, their 2021 annual report said. So this first slide are the number of pins. So we talked earlier about residential, right? We've got a number, so 202,000 plus pins involved for residential. Just a reminder, at both the Board of Review and PTAB, you can do this pro se. You don't have to be an attorney to handle the residential matters. Unfortunately, again, we don't get notice on those, but those are active. These are the pre-tax extension cases filed at the Board of Review. So to the extent that they're resolved at the Board of Review, there's no PTAB case or circuit court case, and therefore you get no refund affecting your budget. Additionally, if you look at the commercial, about 32,000 plus pins, and interesting is the condos, the residential, substantial residential properties, 32,000. We're starting to see a lot of those cases venture over to PTAB because of no resolution at the Board of Review. Now let's take almost a more than 10-year review. Now the data is a little different here. We talked about pins earlier. These are the actual dockets. These are the number of cases that have been filed with the Board of Review. You can have, of course, multiple PINs within one docket. What's interesting, if you look between 2015 and 2020, actually 2021, the board reports, there's a 59% increase in the docket volume at the board. So what is this attributed to? The board believes that their community outreach to get out to let their constituents know commercial, industrial, residential, a condo type buildings, that they are there to assist them with the process. Additionally, they've modernized their process. They were handling volumes of cases before 2016 to 15 solely through paper, and now they have electronic filing process. Additionally, in their own report, they indicate changes in the assessor's practice. So you see the spike in 2019, where people are seeking relief from the Board of Review. Again, to the extent that those are resolved at the Board of Review, that's helpful because they're pre-tax extension. Why don't we move up to the next one? So what trends do we see here? This is a 3-year assessment, a 3-year retrospective here. We have the residential. We talked about that. We saw those volumes of those PINs. We have the commercial, industrial. And then this to the right shows where the triennial is, right? For the collar counties, you're dealing with a quadrennial. For the Cook County assessment, you're dealing with the triennial. So a new tri in 2020 for the South, new tri in 2019 for the North, and a new tri in 2018 for the city. So a substantial residential relief in 2018 for the board. Almost 50% of commercial relief, but not at the level of residential. So obviously the residents are speaking to their board. We need some help. 2019, again, substantial residential relief, 10% less. This is in the North Township. Only 34% of commercial. We have seen quite a few commercial filings from this time period. And then finally, a kind of almost an even split of the level of relief from the board to residential and commercial. Again, pre-tax extension resolutions.
Great. Mike, thank you. We did get one question that I've heard from a lot of clients so far is, given the anticipated very late in the year collection on the second installment, what Scott and I were talking about, probably mid-December, is it expected that March 1 date might move? And if you recall, maybe 10, 12 years ago, towards the end of the Houlihan administration, there were 2 years in a row where the second installment was collected in December, and the General Assembly moved the first installment due date from March 1 to April 1 on a one-off basis. So it wouldn't shock me if that happens again, because otherwise you're paying your second installment, say December 15th or 20th, and then February 1, you're going to get a bill for 55% of your prior year taxes. So literally within like 45 days. And that could obviously be upsetting to people. So don't be shocked if that March 1 date gets kicked to some other time in 2023, say April 1 or something like that. But that's it in terms of the questions. So Mike and Scott and I want to thank everybody for joining us today. We appreciate your time. We appreciate your questions. We're going to make this webinar available online for viewing, YouTube, and some other resources as well. Feel free to share it with your colleagues and friends. And thank you again for being with us today.
Thank you very much.